One of the consistent themes of a real side experiences, as shared by Jeremy, others, and myself, has been in regards to the alien Armada. For indeed, as the creational wake-up proceeds to gather momentum, vast numbers of body types and species, the length and breadth of creation have been stepping up and deciding to become more aware, and an expression of this has been the formulation of a large space fleet comprising of many assorted species, an alien armada that as a part of the overall simulator wake-up has been agreeable to initiate a first contact scenario with Earth, one that will be apparent for all of humanity, with the objective of bringing the human race into a kind of confederation of stepping up and awareness becoming a species. As every situation is dependent on agreement, that for the human race to experience such an event as this is according to the agreements in overall human consciousness that such can be effected. So in reality, that the alien Armada can successfully arrive at Earth is reliant on the placement of agreements with all involved, the aliens of the Armada, the human race, and the dark forces that desire that this event not take place, as it would seriously undermine the control they have of their human slaves. And so, the real side efforts have been in regards to the agreement placement, dealing with all the variables and elements, that if the human overall consciousness is retained as that which is overwhelmingly in support of the dark forces and their controlling desires, this would in fact nullify the ability of the alien Armada to make its presence known globally. For absent of the ideas in a species consciousness in regards to such an event, the alien Armada cannot feature as the effect. The roles, the positions, must be assigned by an individual or species, or others cannot assume them. We cannot actually make alterations to the situations of the overall human species that are to become physical level occurrences. The species must in actuality decide as to their experiences based on their agreement placement. All we realistically can do is present the possibilities, line up the alternative potentialities, and through our dealings and interactions with all involved, attempt to have them re-evaluate their agreements, that what is effected is life and awareness beneficial for all. I recently shared how due to a certain human consciousness dark force implanted idea, so one potentiality for the overall human race was a displacement scenario, where the planet Earth was moved out of a phase, dimensionally speaking, which not only brought the Earth into an apocalyptic style situation, but the consciousnesses of all the aliens of the Armada would take on a certain distortion through their continued agreement with humanity, that as the human consciousness harboured agreement that allowed the dark forces to pull off this dastardly scheme through a consciousness association, that of the aliens of the Armada with humanity, so the dark forces were able to as though infect the alien Armada consciousness. For through others can we be taplined and impacted via the dark forces they have agreements with, as it can be with entire species who have agreements extended to the dark forces also, as was the case in that potentiality, where the consciousness of humanity remained overwhelmingly in agreement with the Dark Force controllers, and this resulted in the aliens of the Armada now having the compulsion to operate in destructive ways as opposed to beneficial, to forfeit their intents with the ears. And so it was deemed prudent that the alien Armada stand down momentarily to delay their impending Earth arrival until various negotiations, the approaching with the key individuals that were involved with the instigating of this Earth displacement, be undertaken, in an effort that all the elements incorporating the overall idea that would be the alien Armada and its beneficial presence be placed accordingly. That not only would the Earth displacement event be no longer a possibility, but that the alien Armada wouldn't be tainted consciousness-wise should they remain on course where this displacement scenario was unfolding. Jeremy recently shared a real side experience where the alien Armada was back on course, and in this real side experience I also would be shown this to be the case. For indeed, in this real side experience, Jeremy and I would be travelling across the Earth and at various locations, although visually discernment of what we were doing would be difficult to describe or indeed recognise for the personal self alone. Real awareness impressions revealed we were making various adjustments to the very frequencies of the Earth. For indeed, it is the steady bombardment of distorted frequencies via the various Dark Force technologies that the human consciousness is more readily retained as complete acquiescence to the Dark Forces. And as a number of my real side experiences lately have revealed, so I and others have been on assignment to nullify the disharmonious nature of these Dark Force controlling frequencies within the parameters that human overall consciousness agreement allows, that better facilitated are these alternative options for humanity, other than perpetual slavery, including the possibility of the alien Armada. As an example, in a brief scene from a previous real side experience, I would be going from city to city globally and making a little addition to every street light, a technological device added to each, so small to be virtually imperceptible to the eye, but which served to mitigate the disharmonious electromagnetism prevalent atmospherically through all Dark Force human bombarding technologies. And indeed, this would be the objective of Jeremy and myself in this experience, lessening the shackles and rigidity of the human consciousness through the frequency alterations we were exacting at key locations throughout the Earth, that the alien Armada then could feature in humanity's overall experience and not be in any way interfered with, or that other Dark Force ideas take prominence in humanity's consciousness, such as the Earth displacement event, etc. And as a confirmation that Jeremy and I had been successful, so would the alien Armada begin to arrive in the Earth's skies. For indeed, the type of crafts at the forefront of the Armada, those leading it, are of a triangular design as it transpires, and as we looked skyward, these triangular craft would now be entering the skies in full view of every human globally, the rest of the Armada shortly to follow. And so, the experience Jeremy shared and my one here verifies that despite a few delays and Dark Force attempted disruptions, the alien Armada has resumed its course for Earth. Ultimately, agreement dictates their ability to arrive and initiate first contact with all of humanity, and so, as this processes through, the new friends continue to align agreement that will pave the way for this happening. But when all is said and done, humanity decides, according to the agreements of their overall consciousness, and the Dark Forces and the alien Armada alike are resigned to the roles humanity afford as to what capacity or extent or even at all they can feature as within humanity's overall experience. In an unrelated scene that followed, I would find myself among a large number of a particular body type that was representational of an entire species. That although the entirety of the scene was more impressions based as opposed to simulated visuals, so not only were the species identities not made available, but were it not for the real awareness impressions, so little could have been discerned as to exactly what I was involving myself with. It seemed the species, whichever they may have been, were in a similar enslaved situation as humanity. Their overall consciousness then was as a construct where agreement was extended to the Dark Force controllers that affected then was the overall experience of the species being that of control, suppression, etc. For indeed, have the Dark Forces in all their expressions and forms gleaned agreement on a vast simulator scale, that effected then for the many species where this agreement has been secured is this slave-controller dynamic, which overall maintains the entirety of the simulator generally as a controlled matrix which benefits the Dark Forces and their controlling desires. It seemed this particular species were on the verge of embarking on the recognizing RealPurpose in their entirety. The real awarenesses of each respective individual of the species had decided this, and required then was for the personal selves to be brought into the picture. As the real awareness decides to recognize the years it is a part of, the personal self will be oblivious of this generally, but will be primed to be receptive to the references pertaining to the ears, the new you sound, etc., even though unconscious of this processing through, and when the references enter the experience of the personal self, be it on the physical or the real side, there will be a sense of familiarity, a recognition, the compulsion to at least consider the nature of what is being provided, be it a new friend entering their midst, stumbling upon a YouTube video in association with a new presentation, etc. Of course then, if the personal self can be retained as to the alignment of its intent with the real intent for is recognition is another matter, as it is quite the journey. But as the personal self is brought into the picture, as the free will must be utilized now to set intent with the ears, so part of the process is a facing of the consciousness and the subsequent releasing of all idea agreements and attachments it comprises of. The vast bulk of the agreements, especially with the consciousnesses of species that are enslaved by the Dark Force controllers, that they are in experiences of slavery, reveals a consciousness that is of a design where this is so, as nothing can be effected absent of agreements that it can, will be a species of consciousness then where the dark forces can control, subjugate, torture, or eliminate by virtue of the agreements that such a controller-slave dynamic will incorporate. And so, as an individual, or in this case, an entire species, begins such a process of consciousness releasing, this will become apparent to the ever-watching dark forces, and they will promptly make use of the agreements which allow them the abilities to disrupt, interfere, harm, and eliminate before these agreements are released, and rendering them unable to do such. For no effect can be experienced absent of the idea agreement. In regards to this particular species, then, the dark forces would intend very drastic action, perhaps even a genocide scenario, for all enslaved species will have installed in their consciousnesses such controller-implanted idea potentialities of depopulation or even annihilation, in the event that they become unmanageable or perhaps be set to begin the journey of his recognition. For although the real awareness can't be in any way impacted, as it is a reality aside from ideas of creation, the body forms can be destroyed. And even though the real awareness's decision to recognize the ears is retained, irrespective of the situations with the created body types, the personal self must still be brought into the picture, and if progressing so far with its grasp of the literal references and understanding, should the body forms be destroyed on the assumption of subsequent body forms with memory vehicles now devoid of the references, so the personal self must be reacquainted with the same references again, and time, so called, is somewhat of the essence, with the simulator teetering very closely to implosion. That such a genociding of stepping up a species, or those on the verge of doing so, can make the difference between creational extrication and being caught in the simulator inevitable implosion through the ears not being recognized, and all consciousness agreements and attachments not released in time. As much as a species may have afforded the roles of suppressors and controllers through their consciousness agreements that the dark forces can then assume, so for others to venture assistance in the decided predicaments of others, agreements must also be extended. Absent of them, and as much as we might wish to intercede into the affairs of others, we will be unable, for we can't then assume positions as effects as decided by them as the ideas, those of assistance or interjection potentialities, are lacking. In this case, however, this particular species, set to be hammered severely by the dark forces, perhaps even to the extent of complete eradication, had extended agreement permissions of such a nature that allowed that I could remodel and restructure the overall consciousness of the species in such a way that the idea agreements that allowed their genocide would be absent, and so unable would the dark forces be to destroy the species. Although the procedure was a somewhat complex, not simply a case of deleting files, as there were many dark force idea variables and elements. After all, this species had been enslaved for the longest time. The agreements to the dark forces ran deep, spanned lifetimes and generations, and was very convoluted. layers upon layers of compounding dark force extended agreements, etc. And so impressions revealed that I attempted this species consciousness overhaul several times, and each attempt so would be revealed on a larger screen the simulation of my efforts, of the effects that would be the overall species experience. It was as though the first attempt had the species genocide averted, but still were the controllers able to instigate severe species impacting methods through the agreements, though lessened, that at least the species wouldn't be destroyed. As I ran through the process again, and on each successive turn, so gradually the severity of the dark force's ability to adversely impact the species became less. As the agreements in the species' overall consciousness were reordered, that denied the dark forces more so, as revealed on the screen. Although more impressions, as I said, including what was featuring on the species' overall experience screen, until eventually one final effort was required. The result satisfactory, in that agreements in the species' consciousness had been reconfigured, that the controlling dark forces could effectively do nothing to them. They were rendered useless in their ability to harm, depopulate, and certainly not able to exact genocide in any shape or form, to the extent that in actuality the dark forces could no longer have any bearing on the continued experience of this species that was set to step up and begin the process of awareness and is recognition. For each individual, and indeed species, decides as to its circumstances. The dark forces can only control if they have extended to them the agreements that they can, and it will be interesting what role this entire species does play in what is to come, and at what point they make themselves known and their identities and body types revealed.